Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby, and today I'm going to be doing my April wrap-up. April was actually a really great reading month for me, and I'm very excited to talk about all of the things I read in April. And so in the month of April, I read 12 books. The number feels a little low for how much I feel like I read this month, but I think it's because I read one of the longest books that I've ever read in my life. It actually tied with another book for the longest book that I've ever read this month, so woot! As far as genres go this month, I read 5 thrillers, 3 horror books, 1 literary fiction, 1 historical, 1 romance, and 1 true crime. It was a very mixed bag, but I was mostly reading thrillers and horrors. Typical. And then as far as ratings go, I had 5-star ratings. I mean, those include my 4.5s, but still 5. And then I had 2 4-stars, 4 3-stars, and 1 2-star. Ooh, but it was mostly a really freaking good reading month. And then I wanted to also say that I had 5 audiobooks included with all of these reads. Audiobooks, amazing. They got me through it. I also wanted to say that I have mentioned almost every single book in this wrap up in a video that I did this month, because I actually did 3 different reading vlogs this month. I had the first reading vlog I did was like a reading anticipated releases where I read like 4 or 5 books in that vlog, I can't remember. And then I also did a reading vlog for The Stand by Stephen King. And then I also did a reading vlog that was like reading new thriller and horror releases. So all of those will be linked down below. I'm gonna try to keep it brief about the books that I've already talked about so much. Very first book that I read this month was The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. I did read this book physically, but I already lent it to my mom to read it because I just loved it so much and she wanted to read it and I was like, yes. But this book is so much fun. It's a thriller and it's very like Mean Girls vibes because it follows this woman, Sophie, who moves from Chicago to this really small town in Texas, and she kind of gets involved with this like group of moms in this small town in Texas who all gather on these Friday nights to have this little gathering called The Hunting Wives, and they like shoot guns together and stuff. And their group is like very cliquey, and they have like one woman in their group whose name is Margot Banks, and she's very like Regina George type, like she's like the queen bee of their group. And oh my gosh, I just loved everything about this thriller. I loved the social dynamics. I love that our main character Sophie is kind of obsessed with this woman Margot. Like I love an untrustworthy kind of stalker vibes main character. Like everything about this book was so much fun, and I just really enjoyed the relationships that these characters had with each other, and I loved the Mean Girls vibes. It was just shocking. It was fun. I gave it 5 stars. Like I just loved it. I don't have anything bad to say about it. It was just a good time all around. The next book I read this month was We Begin at the End by Chris Whitaker. This was actually sent to me by Henry Holt Books, and I did listen to the audiobook, which was sent to me from Macmillan Audio, so huge thank you to them for sending me these. Unfortunately, this book wasn't really my thing. This book is a kind of like a literary fiction, contemporary fiction story about this guy named Walk and his struggles with his regrets in life, kind of like, because he is a chief of police in the town where he works now, but he's still kind of dealing with the fact that a few decades before he gave the testimony that sent his best friend to prison. And then we're also following this young 13-year-old girl named Duchess who is an outlaw, and she's also dealing with a lot of different struggles, and Walk knows her mom Star. They like went to high school together, and so we're kind of following them, and we kind of follow their relationship as they become friends, and they kind of grow this like father and daughter bond. This story kind of reminded me of All the Ugly and Wonderful Things, but obviously it was like less romantic. It was more like father-daughter vibes, but the writing kind of felt similar to that in the sense that we're dealing with this like small town and these characters who are dealing with a lot of sadness and grief. And it also reminded me of Where the Crawdads Sing. Like I feel like if you really like Where the Crawdads Sing, you might enjoy this one more. It kind of has like a similar storytelling feel to it. But for me, it was just okay. I ended up giving it like 3 stars. The next book I read was The Final Revival of Opal and Nev by Donnie Walton, and this book was so much fun. I listened to the audiobook for this one as well. I downloaded it on Libro. And this one is a historical fiction novel about this band and these musicians in the 1970s and their like rise to fame and their whole story. This book was epic because I loved Opal Jewel as a main character. Like I just loved her. This book is told kind of in the same way as Daisy Jones and the Six, where it's kind of told in like an interview format, but in the audiobook it's really cool because it's a full cast audiobook, and so you get to hear the voices of like every member of the band and all these different people. And it's really cool in an interview style format like this because I just like being able to hear hear everybody's take on different situations. I feel like I enjoyed this one slightly more than Daisy Jones and the Six because this one was really political in the sense of not just talking about like females in rock music and how challenging it was to be a female in such a male dominated scene, but also with race, because Opal Jewel is a black woman trying to make it in rock music. And this book just had so many different things to say about race and about feminism, and it was just really great. Like, I just really loved it so much. I love the relationships in this book, and just Opal Jewel in general was just really iconic. The last scene in this book just like gave me chills with her. Like, it was just really great. And I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars, and the only reason why I ended up knocking down a star is totally for my personal taste, because I don't really love stories that follow musicians. Like, I've discovered more, like, I do like reading about celebrities, but I've discovered about my taste is that I do like more learning about like the film industry and seeing like actors and actresses and reading about them as opposed to musicians. I just don't find musicians to be as fascinating for some reason. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this book. I really loved it. I would highly recommend. Next book I read this month was You Love Me by Caroline Kepnes. This is the 3rd book in the You series with Joe Goldberg. And this book was fun. I like the fact that this book takes place in the Pacific Northwest because that's where I'm at. I feel like this book fits right into the series. I mean, I didn't enjoy this one as much as the first book, but I enjoyed this one more than the second book. But I feel like Joe's narration is just very consistent throughout this whole series. Like, I just love reading his inner dialogue in between the pieces of the actual dialogue because it's just really entertaining the way he kind of like makes fun of the other characters. Like, I just think it's really funny. But I also do feel like this book kind of was like a rinse and repeat of like the same formula. Like, it's just, this book is just doing a very similar thing to the previous books, and it is still fun, but it feels like it's getting a little bit like tired just because it is so much of the same thing, like him getting obsessed with this one woman and then like things happening to the people in her lives. You know, it's very like similar to the other books in that sense. And I wasn't a huge fan of the supporting characters in this book, but just because of Joe Goldberg alone, I found this book to be very entertaining. And I still ended up giving this one 3 stars, and I would probably still continue in this series just because of Joe Goldberg, because I really love his narration. I just think it's really interesting. The next book I read this month was The Stand by Stephen King. And this book was a freaking journey. Luckily, I had the audiobook to help me through this massive beast because this is tied for like the longest book that I've ever read. It actually ties with It by Stephen King at 1,153 pages. But I don't know if they actually tie, but both of the versions that I own of The Stand and It are both the exact amount of pages, which I thought was very strange and interesting. If you know nothing about The Stand, it's about this virus that comes and takes over the world, and we're kind of following like the aftermath of this virus kind of wiping out most of civilization. And this book was very interesting. I will say I loved the first 600 pages. I despised the last 600 pages. And I don't know, it was like, I really enjoyed the characters in this book. And it was just that ending, man. Like, the ending just got very, like, it just went places where I wasn't thinking it was gonna go. And I don't know, but I am doing a live show to discuss this book on May 6th, next Thursday, on Krystle's channel. I will have the information linked down below, and we're gonna be talking about this book like hardcore, like all of us. So if you participated in the read along with us this month, then I'm very excited to discuss all of my thoughts with all of those girls soon. Full thoughts will be there, and I also do have my reading vlog linked down below where I talk about all of the spoilery things. But I think I am settling on giving this one like a 3-star. I think that's where it's gonna fall for me. All right, next up, I read Every Vow You Break by Peter Swanson. This is actually my book troop book club pick for the month of April, and me and Noelle are actually going to be doing the live show for this coming up here very soon on May 2nd on Sunday. So I don't want to say too much of my thoughts here, but basically this is the newest thriller from Peter Swanson. If you didn't know, Peter Swanson is one of my favorite authors personally. So this book follows this couple who are newlyweds, and when they're on their honeymoon, this guy shows up on the honeymoon trip that she fucked at her bachelorette party, even though she probably shouldn't have, but she fucked him, and now he's there on the island where they're having their honeymoon, and she doesn't know what's going on. Let's just say I wanted to love it so bad. I really did. But this book just didn't work for me. I think I ended up giving it like 2 stars. And it sucks because, of course, the book that I picked for the book troop is my least favorite book that I read this month. You know, I feel like it's a curse at this point. I don't really know, but either way, I can't wait to discuss it in the live show, and I can't wait to see how Noelle and all of you feel about it. The next book I read was The Drowning Kind by Jennifer McMahon, and this was the first book I read for the second reading vlog that I did this month of reading new thrillers and horrors. So hyped for it because I love Jennifer McMahon. She's one of my new favorite horror authors. We follow in two different timelines. One of them is in the past and one of them is in the present. In the past timeline, we follow this couple who is trying to have a baby and they cannot, for whatever reason, get pregnant. And so they find out about this magical water in their town that if you go to the water will like grant you a miracle. But they also find out that the water might not be so sweet and might be a little evil. And then in the present day, we're following these two sisters who live in this house with this water that's like very magical and has all these curses, and there's something with the water. And then one of the sisters drowns in the water and the other sister is shocked because she doesn't know how that could have happened because her sister was such a great swimmer, and she feels like there's something more to what happened there. And this book was truly like so well written. It was so creepy. I cared so much about these characters, and I love books that follow a sister relationship, like you guys already know. Just the whole like idea of the water in this book, it was truly so creepy. Like the idea of something being in the water with you and you don't know, or the fact of like you like walking around the fucking pool and there's like somebody in the water and like wet footprints that you can't explain, and like it was just so good. It was so creepy, and like the idea of this water was so cool and it was so unique, and I just love reading about shit like this. I feel like this book is so similar to The Winter People, but like in a good way. Like Jennifer McMahon just like knows how to write emotionally moving horror books. It was so good. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. It's a new fave. Loved it. And then I read Arsenic and Adobo for that video as well, and this one is described as this cozy mystery novel. We follow this young woman, Lila, who is taking on her aunt's restaurant because her aunt's restaurant is failing and they want her to take charge of it. When she's there, her ex-boyfriend comes in, who's this like food critic, and he's like a total douchebag and one of the hardest food critics in their town. And when he goes and tries her food that she brings out specifically for him, he freaking drops dead while he's eating it. And so then his dad, who's like with him, blames her and says she's like trying to murder him. And so she gets involved in this like murder mystery with the boyfriend dropping dead. This book, the thing that I loved the most about it was reading about the Filipino culture and the food and the family. Like the Filipino culture reminded me so much of my family's own like Mexican culture and our Mexican family values. Because if you didn't know, I know I'm like super freaking white, but my dad is actually half Mexican and my grandma's full Mexican, and our family, like in our traditions and everything, like they just reminded me so much of this family in this book, and so my heart was just so connected with this family, and they were just really beautiful to read about. And I loved in the beginning of this book how this author included a glossary of the different Filipino terms for like their food and like their family and words that they use, just because since I'm not Filipino, I really appreciated that as like a reference, and I just thought it was really great to read about their culture. And it sucks because I loved everything about this book except for the mystery aspect. I just wasn't super invested in the mystery for whatever reason. I think I found that I prefer my mystery thrillers to be a lot more on the dark side. Like I find that I don't really enjoy these like cozy mysteries. I just don't think they're really my thing. But I gave this book 3 stars just because I still really enjoyed so much of this book, but the mystery itself I just wasn't super invested in. The next book I read this month was Just One Look by Lindsay Cameron. This one is an ARC that I got sent from Penguin Random House, and this one goes on sale July 27th. And this book was like, it was so good. This one is a thriller, and it's about this woman who just recently lost her job, and so she's now working as a temp at a lawyer's office. And so basically her job is to sort through a bunch of different like documents and emails and stuff, and every now and then emails will accidentally come through the system that are from the lawyers who work in her building that are like way higher up than her. And so she starts to see the emails of this one guy named Forrest, who's this like super hotshot lawyer that works in her building, and she starts to see every single one of his emails coming through her computer. And it's like emails to his wife, emails to his clients, like literally everything. And she starts to get so obsessed with him, and then the story just kind of takes off from there. And like as I just said earlier in this, like I love thrillers where the main character gets obsessed with someone else and like with a married couple. It reminded me so much of like Bad Mommy by Taryn Fisher and just like that kind of vibe. Like I don't know why, I eat that shit up. It's one of my favorite tropes in thrillers. I love the way it was done in this book. I just thought it was so much fun, and I gave this book 5 stars. Like I just genuinely really loved it, had a great time. I finished it all within like 24 hours because I was like, I cannot put it down. And then I read Near the Bone by Christina Henry. And this book, oh my god, can we just talk about this cover for like 1 second? Because wow, it is stunning. We love a beautiful cover. But this book was so freaking great. It was so unexpected. I had like literally no expectations going into this, but this is like a new horror novel that just came out. And this one is about this married couple who is living on this mountain, and they're very isolated up there. Like they're very by themselves. And this guy that she's with, named William, he is one of the most abusive pieces of shit you will probably ever read about. And so major trigger warnings for his character, honestly, because it was even a little much for me. Like not only is he physically abusive, but he's also the most like emotionally abusive and manipulative person. Like it's just very disgusting to read about. But anyways, at the very start of this novel, she goes on their property and she sees this fox that is just like completely mutilated on their property, and they're trying to figure out what animal could have done this. And they start to suspect that there's this like creepy monster creature on this mountain with them, and it starts making all these shrieking noises, and like they can't see it, but they know it's near because they can hear branches snapping and shit. And this book was just it was so creepy and so well done, and I was so freaked out. I freaking love in books where there's this unexplained creepy monster creature and it's lurking and you know it's close and you can't see it, and it's just like scary. It's just it's so well written, and this is exactly like my kind of book. This book reminded me so much of The Cabin at the End of the World and Bird Box and Room. Like it was just so it was so good. It was so isolated, and it was so anxiety inducing. Like I was so on the edge of my seat the entire time I was reading this, being like, what the fuck is about to happen? And I just love it. I'm kind of obsessed with it. Like it's a new all-time favorite of mine, and I can't stop thinking about it. Like I genuinely can't stop thinking about it. The last line of this book, like it was a very abrupt ending, and I can see people having issues with the ending of this book. It was abrupt, like don't get me wrong, like I did think the ending was a little abrupt, but like the last line of this book gave me fucking chills and I almost cried. Like it was stunning. And so I gave this book 5 stars, and I fucking loved it. And I know this book won't be for everyone, and this book might piss a lot of people off, but I loved it so much. It was exactly my kind of like, my kind of horror. The next book I read was this true crime audiobook that I listened to called Last Call, and this one was really interesting because it was talking about this serial killer that went around in New York. It was a serial killer called the Last Call Killer who specifically targeted gay people in New York. And this book was just so, it was so informative and just so graphic, and it was honestly like listening to a true crime audiobook because of the amount of detail this author put into like the research and all of the crimes that happened. And I knew nothing about this killer or these crimes before I listened to this, so I thought it was really fascinating and also really horrific and sad. And I just thought all around it was a really informative, good true crime audiobook. So if you're looking for anything true crime, I would recommend this. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And then the last book that I read this month was People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. And if you saw in my first vlog this month, I actually did pick this up at the very beginning of the month, and I read like the first 80 pages, but then I put it down because I wasn't really in the mood for romance. I was just in such a mood for a romance novel, so I just decided to pick this one up again. And oh my god, I'm so glad that I decided to pick this one up again because this book was everything. It was so cute. And this book, it follows these 2 friends, Poppy and Alex, and we follow them throughout, like they met in college and they became best friends. And I like that in this book we actually see them in flashbacks when they meet. And I think that's like my biggest issue because like I don't really like friends to lovers. It's one of my least favorite tropes. I don't even know why, but it is. And I think my main issue with it is because I don't get to see the moments where they actually like meet and where their friendship begins and like how their relationship progresses. And like those are the things I need personally to like root for a couple in a book. But I love that we do get to see that in this book with flashbacks, because their thing is that they go on a vacation together every summer. And so for the past 10 years, they've gone on all these vacations together every summer. And now it's like 10 years later after college and they're no longer speaking, but they invite each other to go on like one last vacation, even though they're not talking to each other anymore. And there's like this extra added mystery of like, well, why aren't they talking anymore? And you're trying to figure that out for like the whole book. I just love this book so much. Like I needed this escapism right now, like seeing them go on all these vacations. Like you literally get to read about every single vacation from the last 10 years. And I just adored Alex so much. Like he's genuinely one of the softest male love interest characters that I've ever read about. Like he was just so cute. And I just adored their relationship so much. Like this is one of the only friends to lovers that like I will get behind this. Like this was so cute. And especially after being so disappointed by Beach Read, I just really thought this was not gonna be my thing at all. I loved it. I loved it so much. I give it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Like I just genuinely loved it so much. Yeah, those are all of the books that I read in the month of April. As I said, it was a really great reading month. Like I'm so stoked. Then please don't forget, I do have upcoming live shows for every Vow You Break on this upcoming Sunday on May 2nd with Noelle. And then I do have a live show for The Stand coming up on May 6th with all of the girls in horror in 24. All the information for these will be linked down below. And yeah, let me know, how many books did you read in the month of April? What was the best book that you read in the month of April? I want to know all about it. I think for me personally, the best books that I read this month were definitely The Hunting Wives and Near the Bone. So great, so iconic. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching as always, and I will see you very soon with a new video.